Hi guys. Before we proceed to this video, we've got something very important to share with you. Neoliberalism, Inequality and Authoritarianism by Professor Jon V. Kofas is available for purchase. You can order it directly from the publisher Little French eBooks or through Amazon.
The bombing of Caracas, Venezuela on January 3rd, 2026, and the snatching of President Nicolas Maduro by US forces, bringing him back to the United States to stand trial for a number of charges, including narco trafficking, has left much of the world in shock. Not so much that this was not expected, but the manner it was carried out, the circumvention of the US laws, as a number of senators, US Democratic senators and Congress people mentioned, and also the defiance of international law, as the United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres pointed out, that this was indeed a violation of international law. Obviously, US politicians, again, Democrats, a few Republicans, former, some current, made some noise about the violation of domestic laws as well, namely circumventing Congress, where it is needed to get authorization in order to carry out such operations. Now, in the analytical video, in the longer analytical video, I place this issue into a broader perspective, the Venezuela situation into a broader perspective, not just about this country, not just about Latin America, not just about the Western Hemisphere, but rather about the role of the United States as a country insisting on claiming that it is abiding by the rule of law, when in fact the record shows very clearly, including one of the most blatant violations, namely defying the International Court of Justice, the International Criminal Court, which have deemed that Israel has committed war crimes, that the top leadership are war criminals, there are warrants for their arrests. And instead, the United States, not just under Trump, because this is not about Trump, as we will see in the longer video. This is about the United States institutional structure, hence the title Militarism as a Way of Life, a tribute to the great American scholar William Epperman Williams, who wrote a fantastic analytical work published in 1980, based on previous essays, basically his reflections on why the United States immersed itself in the Vietnam War. And he wrote a book entitled Empire as a Way of Life, tracing back the roots of American imperialism. And of course, I use the term militarism as a way of life, and implying that indeed the tools of imperialism, which the United States continues to have, are indeed in the defense sector, because clearly the United States is in economic decline globally, and this is a reflection of its decline. A desperate and reckless move, as a number of world leaders have pointed out. A few, by the way, siding with the United States, saying it did the right thing. Those few are among them Israel, Argentina, El Salvador, all countries that have governments that are authoritarian in the case of Israel, an apartheid state, and of course, continuing to carry out genocide despite an agreement that the United States, that the Trump administration tried to engineer. That war hasn't stopped. The killing through famine, as well as minor operations in both in West Bank and Gaza, have not stopped. The other issue here is that the United States carried out the operation in Venezuela against the background, by the way, this is very important, of a massive year-long operation against Latinos inside the United States through Homeland Security and the ICE group, the ICE agency, namely the immigration agency, and sending national security, sending forces from Washington, D.C. to circumvent the local police force, the National Guard, not National Security, the National Guard forces in various cities around the country, from California to other places, Washington, D.C., and so forth, in order to Chicago, mainly Portland, Oregon. And so you have a country already at war against the Latino community inside the United States, which represents about roughly just under 20% of the population, by the way, the Latino community. Now, they do claim that they're going after illegal immigrants, but they have, as a number of US senators and congressmen have pointed out, they have also hit on legal citizens. In other words, people who have the papers to be and have the legal right to be there. So what we have here is a militarist police state operation inside the United States and extended, of course, into into Venezuela, because the Venezuela situation is not isolated. Trump, before and after the Venezuela operation, made it very clear, and so did other administration officials, that Colombia is next, Cuba is next, Mexico may be on the list. In other words, a Western Hemisphere wide operation against any country that dares to claim national sovereignty, allowing its own people to have the right to their own leadership, and that the United States, of course, transcends those rights, the sovereign rights of nations, and it has allotted itself, it has given itself the right to determine what type of government Western Hemisphere countries will have. Even Canada, not a Latin country, the United States, this administration has stated unequivocally that it must become the 51st state of the United States. And even before and after this operation in Venezuela, Greenland on the radar screen, which is interesting because the Europeans, with very few exceptions, like Spain, for example, with very few exceptions, lined up behind Trump in a circuitous way, saying, well, Maduro lacked legitimacy, as though imperialism and militarism, bombing Caracas and snatching a president of another country without, like I said, senators, US congressmen pointed out, no authorization to do this. These are the same people, by the way, that went along with Trump voting for his military budget, for his defense budget. These are not exactly people who are against a strong defense. And as I said, the United Nations unequivocally stating this is a violation of international law. Okay, so when the Europeans line up and say, well, Maduro lacked legitimacy, as though imperialism has legitimacy, as though military operations staging a coup d'etat has legitimacy. So Maduro lacked legitimacy, but the overthrow of Maduro and bringing him back to the United States a unilateral action, again, a violation of international law and domestic laws, that has legitimacy. Now, these same people, the Europeans, may live to regret their support because Trump announced after, he had announced it before, but even after the Venezuelan operation, that Greenland, Colombia, Cuba may be next. So how are they going to? I have no doubt they are not going to shed any tears for Colombia and Cuba. But how will they react to Greenland being taken over as a colony of the United States? Give it any other name, it will be reduced as a colony of the United States. Considering what Denmark stated after Trump made such threats, he has stated repeatedly, even recently after the Venezuela operation. The other issue here, and this is one that I discuss extensively in the longer video, is the global ramifications for this. If the United States accords itself the right to use military action in Venezuela and then extend that to other countries, possibly, how does it have the moral and political authority, the right to say anything if China attempts to take over Taiwan? What can it now say at the negotiating table, sitting across Putin and his negotiators, about Ukraine? What moral and political authority can the US exercise from now on against any great power trying to do exactly the same thing what the US is doing? Trump even said in a post Venezuela operation interview, well, the reason we did it, it's because it's so close. Taiwan is very close, by the way, to China. They can claim the same thing. Well, it's close, so we took it. Ukraine, it's close, we took it. So this is very dangerous in terms of longer term of where the US goes. One last point in this introductory video, the teaser video about the Venezuela situation. This point is about how this issue is not, it is not about Trump. It is not about the GOP, the Republican Party, which lined up behind it. It is about the institutional structure in America. This is why I titled this session, Militarism as a Way of Life. I agree wholeheartedly with William Epperman Williams' thesis, the Empire as a Way of Life thesis, that this, just as in Vietnam, it wasn't just Vietnam. It's empire as a way of life. It is militarism as a way of life. Because when you look in this, just this latest episode of the US operation in Venezuela, at how the media, the US mainstream media, not independent sources like the Intercept, Jacob, and the Nation, and so forth, but just independent media, how they have treated this issue. New York Times, for example, all of them, CNN, all of them, not just Fox News. It is about diminishing the legitimacy of Nicolas Maduro, who, by the way, was no Boy Scout. He had obviously since 2015 US sanctions that debilitated the economy. He tried to do his best, but he's not, I wouldn't call him Mother Teresa either. He had problems. He is not exactly the ideal politician, granted. However, who has the right to determine the will of the people? Does sovereignty, as John Locke, the father of Western liberalism, wrote in the 17th century, in the late 17th century, during the Glorious Revolution of England, does sovereignty rest with the people, or with the defense forces of the United States to determine the fate of other nations. This is the issue. This is why Antonio Guterres, the Secretary General of the United Nations, sounded the alarm. And of course, there is um, a Security Council, UN Security Council meeting that will be taking place, called by Colombia and supported by China and Russia, all of them denouncing what the United States did as precedent setting, very dangerous and reckless, looking ahead. Now, the last issue, and I will leave you with this, is of course the role of American elites. If it were not for them backing this government and its policies domestically, whether going after Latinos throughout the country from Los Angeles to Portland to Chicago to Washington, D.C., if it were not for their backing, as the media reveals, which of course is behind Trump, it is behind Trump even as it softly criticizes some of the tactics. They go on tactics. They don't look at the larger issue that this is class war. They don't look at the larger issue in Venezuela that this is naked imperialism and militarism. That if any other country did the exact same thing, let's say China, Russia in Ukraine, the US would say, what are you doing? This is a violation of international law. How can they say this now? So this is a very important issue about the identity of the American Republic. I invite you to take a look at the longer video. Please write comments, ask questions, and by all means, join this channel. Thank you very much.